inform you about the latest developments, so do join us if possible for the next 3 hours as we put a couple of matters into perspective. And as usual, we always start with the latest on press review. With me I have Kenya's bold newspaper, The Standard and The Daily Nation, who have covered extensively the latest political developments in the country, also touching on education matters, social issues, as well as the athletics championships under 21 that is currently ongoing in Kasarani right here in Kenya. So we'll definitely get to review some of these stories as you get informed, and not just that, later on during the broadcast, we'll get to talk about social security, the importance of actually applying to this and what it helps with later on in life. And we'll also get to talk about gender-based violence later on. In case you didn't know this, the police are set to launch Polycare, and we'll delve deeper into what this Polycare intends to do in terms of alleviating the suffering when it comes to sexual gender-based violence. So it's a packed show, as you can see. So let's get it on the road, beginning first with the latest on the international circles. We begin with Uganda Daily Monitor, who cover extensively some of the stories that feature prominently from the Pearl of Africa. And there you have it. One story, or the top story right there, Museveni's letter to interdict airline bosses goes missing. More details right there, all centered on Uganda Airlines. Even as they cover others, there we go, new polio strain caused by vaccines, says experts. Quite unfortunate right there, where they say the virus was discovered by their scientists a few weeks ago. More details on the latest health developments in the country, even as COVID inspires locals to explore new ways of earning a living. Of course, many have had to restructure their businesses, their sources of income, and innovation perhaps is the take-home during this particular pandemic. Concern over surge in collapsing city buildings in Kampala right there, the latest incident occurring on Monday night. Salamu Musumba withdraws election petition against Kadaga. More details right there in terms of election petitions filed at Jinja High Court. Of course, let's cross over to Rwanda today right now. The latest covered on this particular page, where Rwanda is set to receive about 500,000 COVID jabs from the United States of America, which is part of a pledge by the President Joe Biden, which he made at the G7 summit in the United Kingdom. Good news for the African country, even as HIV vaccine trials are ready to start in the country. Uganda scraps anti-porn miniskirt law, where women rights campaigners hailed this particular court's decision. Uganda's real estate sector remains resilient despite the lockdown shocks. More details right there on the latest from Rwanda. Over to CNN World News. The latest on the international scene. Chaos fuels allies' fears of more America first under Biden, even as the Taliban are sitting on $1 trillion worth of minerals the world desperately needs. Of so much focus on Afghanistan, where the withdrawal seems to have badly undercut Biden's vow to restore competence and empathy to foreign relations. The foreign policy of the United States coming into sharp focus, even as the president holds his ground, defending the U.S. withdrawal. I don't think it was a failure. Those are his words. More details right there, even as New Zealand confirms the Delta outbreak. And we saw one of those countries, I think it's Australia, actually locked down. Or is it New Zealand? New Zealand locked down due to one case of COVID-19. I tell you, taking stance in terms of fighting the pandemic. That's the latest on the international scene. I will definitely keep you updated about the developments happening in terms of the Taliban's blitz to power. Let's talk about local stories right now. I have with me, as I mentioned earlier, Kenya's bold newspaper, The Standard. Looking at the front page, this is what you can expect. Uhuru talks deadlock amid BBI anxiety. Well known, the BBI ruling will be delivered tomorrow by the Court of Appeal, but it's also centered on the political developments and the 2022 lineup, where the presidential race talks between ODM leader Raila Odinga and One Kenya Alliance principals are set to resume after Friday's BBI judgment. following failure to strike a deal on the way forward at the meeting yesterday. Of course, so much speculation on what exactly the meeting was about, even as the president sort of rallies One Kenya Alliance principles and Raila Odinga to come with a united front against his deputy. That's on the front page of The Standard. More stories in terms of varsity courses for top KCSE candidates, including others. Let's take a look at what you can expect on the Daily Nation. The front page at least goes with Uhuru corners One Kenya Alliance chiefs to back Raila, the BBI factor being discussed here, where leaders are set to firm up after tomorrow's court ruling on the Building Bridges initiative. So a lot seems to be backed on the BBI judgment. Even as Raila Odinga mentioned, they will not appeal at the Supreme Court. The focus right now is on the 2022 general election. So what does this mean in terms of those who are propagating for BBI? Interesting questions right there. They also highlight one other story, win for men as MPs back bill on 50-50 child care. COVID-19, the latest, Kenyans seem to be paying more for oxygen. We'll get to cover this and more stories that have been highlighted in today's dailies. But I'd like to begin on this BBI story, all to do with the game plan right now. As I hinted earlier, ODM party leader Raila Odinga has indicated that he has no interest or plans to appeal the ruling from the Court of Appeal on the Building Bridges Initiative bill in case the decision is not in their favor. Odinga indicated that instead of concentrating on appeals, the focus will be on the preparations for the 2022 general election. This statement coming hours before a meeting with President Uhuru Kenyatta at State House, Mombasa, together with other political leaders, including Kalonzo Musyoka, Musalia Mudavadi, Gideon Moi, and Moses Wetangula, in a bid to craft a formidable team that will eventually face Deputy President William Ruto at the ballot. And as Chris Thyro reports, the main challenge still facing the opposition leaders is whom among them will be their presidential flag bearer.
With less than 48 hours before the Court of Appeal delivers the much-awaited verdict on whether BBI is unconstitutional or not, opposition leaders yet again headed to State House Mombasa for another round of talks with President Uhuru Kenyatta, a week after a similar meeting, with the meeting coming only a day after ODM leader Raila Odinga and the One Kenya Alliance OKA leaders held separate meetings in Nakuru County. They first briefed the president on their efforts to solidify their support bases ahead of the 2022 polls. President Uhuru Kenyatta has been keen to see the opposition leaders unite, decide on one presidential candidate that will face Deputy President William Ruto at the 2022 presidential ballot. There has been resistance on the push to have ODM leader Raila Odinga become the presidential flag bearer. According to sources, OKA members are not ready to cede any ground, though they welcome Raila Odinga to OKA, but he should join as an equal partner. Without the BBI, the challenge has been who will agree to shelve his presidential ambitions and support one of his colleagues without getting a top position. In today's meeting, the leaders resolved to hold another meeting after the BBI ruling. But in the meantime, they vowed to continue with their efforts to strengthen their strongholds. Already Raila Odinga has indicated that he will not appeal the BBI ruling in case it rules against their favor.
Tutangoja uamuzi ya mahakama ya mambo ya BBI, sawa? Wakiamua mzuri, sawa. Wakiamua mzuri, sawa. Lakini nobody can stop.
In the wake of heightened political activities ahead of the 2022 polls, the opposition leaders were also briefed on the containment measures being taken by the government, noting that there is a rise in new infection rates and mortality. Also present during the deliberations were Cabinet Secretaries Mutahi Kagwe and Dr. Fred Matiang'i.
That enforcing these measures, all security agencies are directed to ensure that the organizers and/or individual leaders, including senior public sector officials and political leaders, take personal responsibility and are held to account for any violation of the measures.
And although Raila Odinga had lined up a series of political activities which were to see him traverse different counties, advancing his 2022 roadmap, dubbed Azimio la Umoja, he has been forced to suspend the Kakamega and coastal tours. However, he will attend the Homa Bay meeting slated for Thursday. The main plan is to have all the opposition leaders to ensure that their political backyards are locked before any agreement on a possible coalition. Chris Dairo, KTN News.
Okay, so that's the latest from the meeting in Mombasa. There seems to be no clear outcome as they're set to meet right after the BBI ruling has been given. But the elephant in the room, according to this second time the president is meeting the One Kenya Alliance principals and Raila Odinga jointly, is all to do with an opinion poll that seems to be putting Deputy President William Ruto ahead of ODM leader Raila Odinga. And he's asked, rather, the principals to show him how they intend to neutralize the growing popularity without Raila. Back to the question, who needs who more? So let's delve into it in terms of these alliances and whether there will be a joint candidature between ODM and the One Kenya Alliance principals. Joined in studio by Kariuki Ngunjiri, who's a political analyst. It's great to have you with us. And later on, we'll be joined by Suleiman Bashir, who's a lawyer or advocate of the bar. Okay, so Ngunjiri, what say you about this headache right now? Because it seems the opinion polls are pitting Deputy President William Ruto ahead, but this unity in purpose is far-fetched according to the latest meetings we've had. Do you envision a united opposition against Deputy President William Ruto?
Yes, first of all, I think that the opinion poll is true and it reflects the feelings, attitudes and emotions of the people on the ground. It is absolutely correct. Number two, I also think that, one, because the president is now uniting these people, the former NASA principals, and he has said that they should support Raila Odinga. It is clear from whatever the president is signaling that he is not going to settle for another candidate apart from Raila Odinga. So this technically means the structural stress that comes from within ANC, from KANU, and from Wiper will continue for quite some time because the pressure is mounting on the principals to go for no other position but the presidential position. And yet, no one is willing to, or rather the president is not willing to sit down and agree with them. So this means that either there will be another breakaway in the coming days, even after the BBI ruling is out, if at all it is going to withhold the position of the High Court. Again, number two, it is also expected that even if the president was to continue and settle for Raila Odinga, here comes a question. So what political capital does the president have? I give you an example. Look at the election of 2017. What amount of votes did the president get and where did those votes come from? Those votes were in central Kenya and Mount Kenya region where he got the highest number of votes. So if indeed the president was to transfer this to Raila Odinga as a presidential candidate, he would only, in a tentative, now looking at this scenario, case, transfer the votes of his area where he got legitimacy in 2017. But the case is different right now, Rogers. Already, he has been inherited as an outgoing president by the deputy president from his backyard. So I think that the president has no political capital in terms of the numbers that he got in 2017 to directly transfer to Raila Odinga. I think that for the president now to have changed his position from supporting William Ruto now to supporting Raila Odinga, there was no confusion in that. Already, and this is the culture and the nature of the people of Central, they have a culture of keeping promises. Ever since the days of President Jomo Kenyatta, when, for example, in Murang'a, Chief Njiri decided to step down, look at that history.
Since you're talking about promises, we had recently in Muranga, I think, Raila Odinga mentioning, rather his ilk mentioning that he first supported Mount Kenya region through Mwai Kibaki, the 2002 coming together. But what say you about that?
You see, for Raila Odinga, and I think that he must have noticed this, he has made strategic blunders for quite some time. I think that when he said, I have now mastered how to climb the mountain, he meant that he has learnt the blunders that he was making earlier. You see, for the people of Mount Kenya, there is consistency and you being closer to them as a part of legitimizing you. So, another scenario for the case in Mombasa is that Raila Odinga, just in case, even if the president will now seek to bring back his political capital in Mount Kenya region and now start wing the people of Mount Kenya region behind Raila Odinga. That means he can only be able to transfer that political capital with someone from central Kenya. Technically, we can see Peter Kenneth being fronted around Raila Odinga. So that means there is no opportunity for the other One Kenya Alliance principles, who now, I think, it's time that they must chart their own political path. Because the future in Raila Odinga's camp seems to be dimming, and I don't see a situation whereby if the BBI ruling was to stay as it were, that, for example, a running mate from the Oka Alliance would be subjected into a coalition with Raila Odinga when the president has interest in this succession and when he seeks to transfer the votes or the legitimacy that he got in the last election to Raila Odinga. So it is almost no chance, unless they choose to go their own way, for the Oka Alliance principles, because it's clear that the likes of Peter Kenneth will be deciding on issues of Raila Odinga in the region, and they are most likely, because of the numbers, going to take that position.
Okay, let's see how it all plays out. But others argue that these leaders are just playing hardball. At the end of the day, they're trying to raise their political clout, and they will later come together as they have various issues to bring to the table. I'm joined by Suleiman Bashir, as hinted earlier, lawyer, advocate. Let's talk about the tactical retreat by Raila Odinga. Just yesterday mentioning that he will not move to the Supreme Court should the Court of Appeal rule against the push to amend the Constitution. Well, what do you read from this?
The initial judgment that was delivered by the High Court was close to an 800-page document. And I think it was well detailed, and certain parties had actually, the reality is that they had appealed against it, and the matter is now before the Court of Appeal. You ask yourself, what are the chances of the Court of Appeal upholding this or even dismissing that specific verdict of the High Court? In the event the Court of Appeal upholds the decision of the High Court, the goose of the former Prime Minister is cooked. In the event the Court of Appeal dismisses the judgment of the High Court, I think he will have carried his day. So, Jesse, the reality is when the former Prime Minister comes to Kenyans and tells them that, indeed, I will not appeal the verdict of the Court of Appeal, it makes a lot of timeline sense. You know, when you look at the timing that the only few months that we are to election, vis-a-vis any party appealing to the Supreme Court and how the procedures at the Supreme Court shall again be conducted, any party or any reasonable man will tell you there is no point of appealing. Because in the event anyone tries to appeal against that, and by the time a decision shall be rendered by the Court of Appeal, that will be, we shall be at some point somewhere on the first part of the subsequent year. So I'm not surprised that the former Prime Minister has said that he will not appeal against that decision. That makes a lot of sense. And I think, Jesse, the other thing that Kenyans need to note is that one of the courts that make a lot of sense in this country so far, looking at the sound judgments that those courts have delivered, is the Court of Appeal. So I think for me, as a legal practitioner, any outcome or any verdict that shall be rendered by the Court of Appeal is one thing that all Kenyans shall have to respect. And I think that shall be a very sound judgment, noting the previous judgments that had been rendered by the Court of Appeal previously. Jesse, the other thing that I wish to mention is that by the close of business tomorrow, the alliances that we have seen in our country shall take a proper shape. depending on the outcome of that particular case.
Okay.
Looking at the proposals of the BBI Constitutional Amendment Bill of 2020, it was fronting a certain expanded executive. That tells you, with the camp of Raila, certain parties or a number of parties or members shall be in a position to maybe benefit in the event the referendum sails through, him being the champion of that specific amendment. So I think in the event the outcome of the Court of Appeal shall favor Raila's camp,
okay,
I think the specific discussions that we are now seeing around Mombasa shall cement and shall forge a certain proper direction going forward. So
it's make or break for the country's political destiny. But do you envision a united coalition of the willing, as Raila mentioned? Because he mentioned we want everyone on board and we are still in talks. So One Kenya Alliance, Raila Odinga, what do you picture of this?
You see, Jesse, when you look at how the politics of our country has over time been structured, our politics are ethnic-based. It is about who commands which area, who is the kingpin of a certain area. It's about a game of numbers. It's about looking at which regions are so important to us. Just to give you an example, you do not see any of the presidential aspirants clamoring for Northeastern region. That tells you a game of numbers already. They had actually forgotten about that region because they are looking at the numbers that are at stake. I think going forward, for the former Prime Minister to say that we shall have everyone on board, it may not make political sense, ideally, because politics is about the interest of each and every aspirant. In fact, Jesse, I'll not be surprised to see that in the near future, one of those who was actually seated with the President yesterday in Mombasa may even end up being with the President, Deputy President. So in politics, a lot can be done, a lot can change, but I think going forward, Raila shall carry the day a lot, and I think a lot shall be to his advantage in the event the Court of Appeal abolishes the judgment of the High Court.
Okay.
On the flip side, I think, Jesse, it is actually very important to note that when you sit down and make those specific calculations, there are three regions that are very important for any party who shall win the subsequent election. It is Mount Kenya region, the Coastal region, and the Western Bloc. Because the Rift Valley, as they say, it is already, quote-unquote, locked for the Deputy President. So I think there are certain areas that I think the specific presidential aspirants are clamoring over. But, Jesse, it shall be foolhardy to dismiss those people or those leaders that we had seen who were seated with the head of state yesterday. The likes of Gideon Moi, the likes of Mudavadi, Wetangula, and Raila. And I think the moment those guys join hands, I think we shall have to await a positive outcome for them if the status quo remains as it is.
Okay, well noted. Let's see what the courts decide on BBI tomorrow. But Ngunjiri, looking at President Uhuru Kenyatta telling party chiefs to disband their alliances in readiness for a larger formation to face the DP, what's of the best interest in Deputy President's camp right now? In terms of BBI, what will work for him when the ruling comes? And in terms of coalitions, is it still possible to go it alone come 2022?
First of all, I seek to thank the President for affirming the perception that the Deputy President is ahead, and also warning the other Oka and Raila Odinga, telling them that if you're not careful, then already things are bad. I think that is a good thing in politics.
But a day in politics is a lifetime, you know.
That is positive legitimacy that you've been given by the President, by the way, who we all respect as the head of state. Let me say this. I think that it is clear, because we already now less than 1 year to elections, that the people of Kenya, and like you saw when that judgment was given some times back, there were celebrations and jubilations all over the country. And people are now decisive that they are ready for the next election, and they are not willing to engage in any referendum course in between here. It's already been taken as the gospel truth that right now the most important activity for this country is the next election, which comes now less than those days that I have mentioned.
Okay.
So the people of Kenya are psychologically prepared for an election in 2022. And I want to agree with Raila Odinga that people need not to waste a lot of time trying to decide on a shortcut, but rather go and seek a mandate of the people. So from us, we believe that it is very important for the people of Kenya to be given an opportunity to express themselves and elect their president, while at the moment we prioritize a discussion that is based on the economy of Kenya and which seeks to improve the livelihoods of our people. So we are not concerned by whatever happens in the BBI. Personally, I have not been a proponent of BBI, so it's none of my business. I literally don't care. So what I care about is that we have a discussion which will seek to improve the living human condition in Kenya. So that is where we are, and everybody else is looking at us now, not just cementing President Kenyatta's legacy, because we have been in the Jubilee Party, and it is the ruling administration. So for this legacy and to avoid a situation whereby there will be questions, and the people will be asking us, oh, you told us that this party is the party that is going to emancipate the people of Kenya, but now we have seen a different result. So we must make sure, even when this politics is ongoing, it is very important for the government to work for each and every Kenyan, and all of us must support the government to make sure that the country succeeds.
All right.
So the point here is, as I conclude, that no matter whichever outcome tomorrow, and I hope it will be to affirm the High Court judgment, because of my own reasons, that I believe the BBI was an autocratic card setting that will deprive us of the autonomy to be the determiners of our own destiny in a way, by bringing, for example, imperial presidency on and all those things. So those are some of the reasons that are personal to me on why I think that now people should be ready. I think other coalitions should now move across the country, go and talk to Kenyans, those that are selling trickle down, to express themselves to Kenyans. We who are selling bottom up, continue doing the same, and the people will decide.
So focus is on the economy. BBI, according to your camp, or perhaps your personal statement, is null and void. What's your take on that, Bashir?
Jesse, I think you raised a very vital question when you ask, actually, why do we have a lot of attention centered around the Deputy President? Jesse, when you look at the way the Deputy President actually has engaged Kenyans, he had chosen a certain group called the youth, who do not belong to a certain tribe, who are normally affected by the economies of the day. And I think the politics of class then came up, issues to do with the Hazla movement and all that. So we have had the class card of politics. Then, around that again, the youth ended up figuring out that indeed, whoever is speaking about our interest is the Deputy President, I think, in a way. And I think once that has happened, we again look at who forms the biggest bloc in our country. The biggest population in our country is made up of the youth. Then again, you look at, now that the class issue has actually been shared with them, are they suffering the most within our economies of scale? Yes, indeed. So who has taken advantage of them? I think it is the Deputy President, depending and looking at how he is able to share his policies with them. So I think the reason as to why we are having a lot of attention centered around him is because he has won the faith of a huge chunk of the youth voters. And I think that shall be the decisive voting bloc in the subsequent election. Looking at the Zambian election, the biggest determinant was the youth, actually. So looking at, again, our subsequent election, the youth of this country shall be in a position to say who exactly shall be the president of our country. Now, I think my message to the youth shall be, any of the alliances that we shall see in the near future, let them share with us their manifesto. We look at their policies and see how they're going to change the economies, and actually how they're going to alleviate the youth of the sufferings of the day. Just again, on the other part that what you had actually mentioned about the BBI thing, the BBI proponents are seeking to amend our constitution. If the constitution is amended, it will affect you, myself, and each and every single Kenyan. Kenyan. I think we should be so concerned about the verdict, the impending verdict of the Court of Appeal in the event the green light is given to the proponents to move with the amendment. I think we should all look at the amendment carefully, make selective application of it, see what favors us. If it is in our interest, we shall be able to vote it. If it is not within our interest, we shall not vote for it. And I think tomorrow's verdict is very important to all Kenyans because what is at stake is a constitutional amendment moment that shall impact all our lives.
Okay, well noted. Ngunjiri, there's some developments happening in central Kenya region, specifically within the Jubilee Party, who seem to be building the party from the ground up in terms of mobilization as well. And just yesterday, we had the Jubilee Vice Chair call out those members of parliament who are trying to target him for ouster removal from the top officials in the party. And he said they only take express instructions from the president on every decision, and he's the only one who can kick them out. But what say you of the Jubilee Party right now, even as we see a Jubilee Reloaded trying to push the grassroots and mobilizing and all that?
I think that it is now coming to manifest that they are now not one camp or not two camps, but I think right now they are now three. There is a camp that broke away from Jubilee and has now joined the United Democratic Alliance, which we belong. There is another camp that has come out of Jubilee, but is not yet accepting the reality that Jubilee is dead, led by the likes of Ngunjiri Wambugu, Kanini Kega, the ones that gave a press conference yesterday. So that camp believes that it is time that the party gets a new vibrant leadership that requires to bring the party back to where it was. But already the damage has been caused. The question, and the biggest one here, is do the members of parliament that were speaking yesterday have any legitimacy in central Kenya? The question is that their future is hanging on the balance. And if they are not careful, because the Jubilee Party was supposed to be a party that goes beyond the 2022 elections. But now it's lost the legitimacy that it had in the 2017 elections. And you saw it in Kiambaa. I was on the ground myself. Nobody was proud of wearing a red T-shirt. Even on the streets, you could see that everybody was very happy and excited to wear a yellow T-shirt. So that tells you that people do not feel proud to be associated with the Jubilee Party in central Kenya. So it means that for the likes of Ngunjiri Wambugu now to have come in late and start saying that the party needs to be taken away from the likes of Murathe, I think that this is another team of members of parliament who are on their way out but have decided to cling on the party when cheating themselves that things will change. I think that it is time that will tell, but in the near future, almost 3/4 of those you saw in that press conference will have jumped to UDA. And then the likes of Murathe, who have no political interest, by the way, in this republic, they are not vying for any election, they will, of course, make sure that they remain with the title deed and every other documents of the party as elders within the Mount Kenya region, just like we saw it happened in parties like, for example, Ford Asili and those others, whereby they now retire with it and go home with it, and those that will be left wondering and staggering on where to go are some of these members of parliament who have not accepted the reality. Another last point is on the officials, the top officials led by, for example, David Murathe. If you follow the route of Murathe as a politician and you have no political interest for the future, then you are on your way into oblivion. You'll be forgotten. And this is evident because if the party dies today and you have no legitimacy, you have no general goodwill from the people, then on which party will you vie when all the other people have already taken course within the emerging United Democratic Alliance Party.
Okay, we'll wait and see how many members of parliament actually, transfer their loyalty to UDA right now, since it's a game of wait and see currently. But those of the other side, the likes of Tuju and Murathe, hold that it would be detrimental to let members of parliament decide the way forward in terms of restructuring, since most of them don't get re-elected and they have to involve aspirants. But Suleiman, I'm reading a post right here from Gunjiri Wambogo, who is sort of reflecting on the lessons learned in Kiamba, and one of them seems to be centered on the removal of this top hierarchy members, including Honorable Raphael Tuju, the Secretary General of Jubilee Party. Do you think going for this top heads within the party is actually part of restructuring, or they're focusing on something totally different?
You see, Jesse, when you look at the initial, the genesis of the Jubilee Party, this is a party that has actually emanated from a combination of URP, TNA, and maybe to some extent KANU right now. Okay. But I think going forward, now if today the party leader calls for a PG, ask yourself how many members of that party shall attend. I assure you, a huge block of it may not show up. That tells you the party is already gone. Now, look at it this way. Instead of right now focusing and refocusing and actually putting all the energy in ensuring that all the members, those who have actually left the party, quote unquote, and those who seem to be staggering around looking for other parties, instead of bringing them together, the moment you go after the party officials, I think that party is now doomed. And that is why, going forward, we may end up having new political alliances, new political outfits, and new parties. This tells you that for instance, if I give you the example of those members who are in URP, these are people who have a huge stake in the Jubilee Party. They were part and parcel of its initial formation. You cannot say that this party shall move without them at the moment, unless on their own motion they decide to leave it and maybe join another camp. Now you ask yourself, those who are remaining, what should happen? I think seemingly it will appear like this is now a Mount Kenya party, which again, the very members from that region seem to be committed to destroying the party in totality, because the moment you again go after the party leaders, the moment you go after the political party officials, and the moment you go after those who are said to be in Tanga, I think the rightful energy should be, they should focus and see how can they bring back their own, the likes of Kimani Ichung'wah, to see how can we speak as a region. Instead of now warning them, instead of warning the party officials, I think the moment they take up this strategy, the party is gone down the drain.
The other question is, does the party leader care? Because already the president, if he was determined, for example, to support what the likes of Wambogo are saying and that other member of parliament, I think that the president would be now calling for unity within the party that he leads, but he decided to go silent on it. So this gives you a signal that unless, for example, the likes of Murathe and Tuju, who are now at the helm of the party, decided to engage these members of parliament, it means that the members of parliament will be frustrated the same way those that have decided to join UDA right now were frustrated, and with time they will seek an alternative to vent out their concerns.
But these individuals act with the blessing of the president. They're his mouthpiece. We only assume that, right?
You see, there is no, for example, the required legitimacy that, for example, David Murathe would have to be able to give instructions to members of parliament when even himself was appointed as an interim official. The president is the one who has the final say on the affairs of the party. So if the president was to decide on something, nobody would question that. But in this case, why is the president not coming out to mention even the party in some of his addresses? So those are some of the signals that tells you the president is not interested in whatever is going on. They might have, for example, been consulting him maybe on some of the steps that they need to take. But maybe because of him being involved in other affairs, I think that he has decided to just let the party be, and that is why it's crumbling, and it has already crumbled.
But his own words, he mentioned he's focusing on development and not politics. So, Bashir...
So the lack of having a listening ear by the party leader is what will make these other people now also decide to move out.
Jump ship as well. Bashir, put a final point to this.
Jesse, I think at this juncture, it is quite unhealthy to say that the head of state has given a blank ear on his party issues. You see, Jesse, a party has the party leader and is deputized by the deputy party leader, who in turn is now the deputy president of our republic. I think when you look at that political mat that the president has actually laid down, the deputy president and his camp are no longer part and parcel of that specific mat. They are no longer seated there. They had actually decamped. So now you look at this, you look at it this way. Is it time for the president now to focus on the political party issue, or is it time for him to now focus on the 4-point agenda that he has actually shared with Kenyans? The issue of a party he should have been more interested in it if he was seeking to vie again, to tell them that I have indeed given you my manifesto in 2017 and I have done ABCD. But I think for the head of state right now, what he should commit to is, at the end of his term, he should tell Kenyans the 4-point agenda, the 4 sacred actually points that he has actually given Kenyans, has he achieved them? Those are the big questions and those are the big issues that he should commit to addressing. If we see him right now, I think, meddling in political party issues, trying to, I think, addressing political party questions, I think he shall lose the bigger picture, which is being committed to the development of all Kenyans.
Okay.
Jesse,
he's a symbol of national unity. We have to move on, sir.
Yes, word on the ground has it that the Jubilee Party has outlived its usefulness, and it's time for people to move on and seek now alternatives that reflect what the people want at the moment. So that is the best way that we can summarize that.
But
it's the perception on the ground.
Okay, it might be a perception of a certain section of the population, but it seems the party is busy forming an alliance with ODM in the coming future. So let's wait and see, because a day in politics.
I think the reason as to why the party is now seemingly forming an alliance is the head of state needs a parliament whereby he has numbers for him to pass crucial policies, crucial bills, and take certain executive functions. And I think this is the time for him to be given the support to deliver to the people of Kenya on his agenda. Looking at the party issue, Jesse, a party is just a political movement. It's just a vehicle that is used to attain a certain political objective. He has used the Jubilee Party to ascend to a certain seat. Now that he's on the seat, the big question is, how can he transform the lives of the people of Kenya? Whether he joins hands with the former Prime Minister or the Deputy President, it's not important. What is important is he delivering to the people?
As simple as that. Allow us to continue, gentlemen. We have to talk about other issues, and key amongst them is all to do with the concerns around the curfew. Others were pushing for lift of the curfew and vaccinate the people, and in order to save Kenyans from the economic suffering that is. But just recently, 4 police officers were arrested over claims of robbery with violence while enforcing the COVID-19 pandemic curfew rules. In what has left the police service on the spot over the implementation of the curfew, protocols Kenyans took to the social media calling for the curfew to be lifted under the hashtag #EndCurfewNow. However, President Uhuru Kenyatta has once again issued a public order that the country continues to observe the curfew for a period of 60 days. This came on a day that the High Court ruled that the National Security Advisory Committee has no powers to order the police on how to conduct its duties. The court observed that the top security organ was not part of the police service. Daniel Kariuki with more details.
Hashtag #EndCurfewNow on social media has been trending for a couple of days as Kenyans call for the review of the curfew rules. Irene Wamaru on Twitter says, and I quote, "It's time to end this curfew. It's serving no purpose. In a country where freedom of movement is enshrined in the Constitution, it's time they stop killing us just for being outside at hours dictated by them." End of quote. Perhaps it's the manner in which the police have handled the enforcement of the directive that has angered Kenyans who are now up in arms over this directive. Tuesday night, 4 police officers were arrested over claims of robbery with violence while enforcing the COVID-19 pandemic curfew rules.
Shikwa na polisi ambao walikuwa wanaendesha operesheni ya curfew, na mmojawapo hao maofisa wa polisi alichukua simu yake na akaweza kuzambaza pesa ambayo ni 1,130 ambaye alikuwa anaenda kutumia na familia yake. Naambia wananchi wa eneo hili kwamba wanapopata dhuluma ya aina hiyo wakuje kwetu. Hakikisho letu ni kwamba hatutataka kuacha wananchi wadhulumiwe na maofisa ambao wako wanahudumu ambao wanapaswa kuwalinda maisha yao.
This coming barely a day after 6 other police officers were arraigned over the death of 2 brothers in Embu, and Kenyans say they cannot take it any longer.
Kuhusu curfew, mimi sioni ikisaidia juu hata unapata kitu saa 5 watu wako mtaani. Siona the effects ya curfew.
Sasa mimi hadi naona watu nikawa sharti nomo. Unaona? So vile watafanya wakati vitu zikuwa wazi, walisha vitu zikuwe nomo.
Ile watu wanafaidika na curfew ni polisi peke yake.
But even before their calls could be heard, President Uhuru Kenyatta has extended COVID-19 containment measures for another 60 days.
That the hours of curfew in the territory of the Republic of Kenya shall continue to be observed from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. for a further containment period of 60 days.
Further, President directed that all other social gatherings, including weddings, funerals and all similar events or ceremonies, shall strictly adhere to the 100-person attendance limit as prescribed, saying the review was occasioned by the exponential rise in infection rates across several counties due to unrestrained gatherings in breach of the guidelines issued by the Ministry of Health.
That the operations of bars, restaurants and eateries shall continue as guided by the Ministry of Health guidelines, failure to which appropriate action against management, staff, patrons and premises shall be taken.
But even as Kenyans adhere to the rules, focus shifts to the government on how the restriction will be implemented and if the curfew rules will be reviewed. Daniel Kariuki, KTN News.
Okay, so there seems to be fury over curfew, the president extending it for a further 60 days, even as Kenyans were sort of pushing for the lifting of the curfew despite the high number of cases of COVID-19 within the country. So when you couple the vaccination numbers, Suleiman, what do you think informed this particular move, regardless of what Kenyans were saying in terms of being tired of a curfew?
Just you see, the statistics as at yesterday, around I think 1.5 million Kenyans have in totality received the jab, be it the first or the second dose. And I think those who can now be said to have received both jabs are around 748,000. That is actually worrying trend, noting that the kind of target that the government has set is to vaccinate about 27 million Kenyans. Right now we are at the stage of 2.8%, and that is actually a very a dark dream that we are so far witnessing. Now you ask yourself, why did such a trend on end curfew now maybe? Why was there such a conversation on social media? Now, for us to respond to that, we ask ourselves, as the people of Kenya, has this curfew assisted a lot? Has it helped? What is it doing actually? Is it improving in terms of the health care that we're having? Is it helping us reduce the disease? The only outcome that Kenyans had actually witnessed about this imposed curfew hours is people of Kenya are being killed, brutalized and victimized in the hands of the police officers, in the hands of investigative officials. Okay. And I think, Jesse, that is what has actually informed the fury that we had seen on social media. And that is why the people of Kenya are no longer interested in these curfew hours. Now, my biggest concern, again, as an advocate of the High Court is, in the midst of the COVID-19 containment measures, as the head of state was speaking yesterday, there was a 65-page judgment that was delivered by Justice Anthony Mrima. Okay. The High Court judgment actually questioned certain decisions that was made by the National Security Advisory Committee. That has actually been approved by the National Security Council. And I think it has actually lifted the whole issue of, in the name of COVID-19 pandemic, trying to frustrate the people of Kenya's right to freedom of assembly. And I think right in the midst of that judgment is when the head of state yesterday came and addressed Kenyans on the COVID-19 containment measures. Jesse, we ask ourselves, when shall we respect the valid orders of the High Court? That is a 65-page judgment, very sound, that goes to the core of the right to freedom of movement and the right to freedom of assembly. It gives certain legitimacy to the Inspector General of Police. It actually orders him not it actually recommends to the Inspector General not to be ordered around as to the way he will discharge his functions.
Okay.
That, I think the court yesterday, with respect to the judgment, was so sound that it was actually recognizing the National Police Service as an institution. It was respecting the functions of the institution. But right in the midst of it, the head of state came, reviewed those specific, not so effective and not so important containment measures that actually has been in place. Just finally, let me add this, that it is actually a very worrying issue that the political class has made a mockery of this quote-unquote addresses by the cabinet secretary and the head of state. Okay. These containment measures have been taken advantage of by the political class who do not abide by them. We normally see rallies that have been ongoing. You know, the head of state was yesterday just reviewing them and extending them. The COVID-19 measures with respect to not allowing political rallies has been in place. We had actually seen the other day in central Kenya, in Nakuru, in all of our places we can see political rallies.
Quite so.
We ask ourselves, are these specific containment measures and these regulations that the government is issuing, is it applicable to the ordinary mwananchi? If you see me outside past 10 p.m., why will the police clobber me, and why will the police not enforce these measures against the political class who are actually going out there in public barazas and who are actually assembling all Kenyans? It is not effective, and that is what has actually informed yesterday's conversation.
Selective enforcement, in short words. So, Ngunjiri, as we talk about this, what key areas of concern going forward into this other 60 days do you think should be highlighted, even as we see cases of Kenyans paying more for oxygen? It used to be 2,000, right now a cylinder has 6,500 price tag on it.
I think that, first of all, the president must have been advised by those that advise him on security affairs that the curfew has brought down insecurity in certain areas, and especially in urban areas, where now with the containment measures, it means that the people are going to go home early and nobody will engage in those late night activities, which almost everything is almost associated to crime. But then, sometimes I ask myself several questions. What is the thinking behind, for example, allowing people to interact for some hours, up to around 10 p.m. Bars are open, hotels are open, and then you say that we need to have a curfew from 10 p.m. It's just a few hours, I think 6 hours or 5 hours. So even if it reduces perhaps the length of interaction, people still interact on a day-to-day basis, and this is experienced especially because now, even in matatus, people are now allowed to board in full capacity. For cases of the ongoing surging of COVID-19 infections, I think that the government priority as the body that is mandated with taking care of the lives and property of Kenyans must make sure that, and I agree with one of your journalists here, Akisa Wandera, that it is time we looked at some of these issues, even if they will not be reviewed, all of them. For example, maybe some of which include political rallies, which have been viewed as super spreaders, can be contained, but some things like curfew, I think they were just for security concerns and were not informed by the science behind the transmission of